Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of Action Awareness, I want to talk about Ban List of the Geeks. Ban List states, for each other player, name a card and look at that player's hand. They must place any copies of that card from their hand on the bottom of their deck. There are clarifications that state when the card cannot be named, you can describe it for people newer to the game, but I always encourage the game to be taught with a card list anyway. With Ban List, it's extremely important because players may not even be aware of what cards exist, much less whether or not to ban them. If you're interested in an up-to-date cards list you can print out, check out the Crank It Up Facebook page. The Geeks have 2 copies of Ban List, and for good reason. Each faction contains 20 cards, with the standard faction distribution having 12 unique cards. All copies of the card are placed on the bottom of your deck, but the first time you play Ban List, you may not know what is in someone's hand. Sometimes the first Ban List is a setup card that lets you inspect the hand, giving you more information for a precise follow-up Ban List. You could also use min-maxing to inspect the hand beforehand, but I don't like to do this. I'd rather play one powerful action and gain its benefits than place it on the bottom of the deck. Ban List is really interesting to me because it asks a number of important questions. The first question is it worth trying to play 2 times in a row? You can really deplete someone's hand on a single turn and handicap their options, while also having the most certainty on the second Ban List. The game that comes to mind is Love Letter, the former AEG game. If you've ever played it, you know that the number 2 card, Priest, lets you inspect another player's hand. Typically, that player will want to play that card immediately in order to invalidate the information, otherwise they would die from a guard card. You typically have 1 turn to pin them down. Let's say you guessed wrong on Hidden Ninja and saw that a player has 2 Shinobis in their hand. You might want to play Ban List again immediately to take out their Shinobis. Otherwise, if I were the Ninja player, I might be inclined to play one of my cards to ensure that it doesn't get buried. At the same time, when you are invader hunting, perhaps you are saving a Ban List for another attempt in a few turns after they beamed it up. This way, you know that they have the invader in their hand and you're not going to waste your card. It's an interesting thought process. Even more interesting is, what card do you target? Do you play the odds and name a frequently occurring card, or do you target the card you simply don't want to have in a player's hand? The more instances of a card in the deck, the more likely you are to be successful. But what is success? I find that the situation drives the decision, but I personally tend to use Ban List as a sanity check against specials. With ninjas, I tend to target the Shinobis more because I get the best of both worlds, frequency and potency. But for the most part, while I can target all 4 of your gremlins potentially, I'd rather make sure you lose your leprechaun. As an alternative, you can also play the odds and use the opportunity to inspect the hand to see if a player has their special cards. Simply knowing that a special is in play is half the battle, because then you can plan for it, rather than simply hoping that they haven't drawn that powerful Phase 3 card. In some respects, I consider the ability to look at each player's hand more powerful than the actual banning itself. The Geeks are all about information. While you can affect 1 card name at a time, you gain a lot of information about that player's next turns. Do they have any minions? Do they have any actions? Are they primed for a big drop on their next turn? As part of Ban List, I'll take the opportunity to calculate how much power a player can drop in a single turn, so I can successfully avoid power creep. The game could have easily gone the route of honesty and just had the player remove all copies from their hand, but instead, you are allowed to inspect the hand, which is worth so much more than validating whether or not your friends are liars. Ban List can be extremely powerful when other considerations are met. The Vikings have an excellent setup card in Cast the Runes, which lets you look at another player's hand and play an extra action immediately. Also, don't play Innsmouth against the Geeks when 1/4 of your deck is the same named card. It completely destroyed my Blossom Locals play I was about to do, but this does make for a great handicap situation when you are trying to teach the game. When there are certain cards that you know will be held in hand, Ban List is amazing. The groupies are almost always chained together because they are bad otherwise, and Ban List can really hurt the Rockstar player. In this example, quantity is a byproduct of the nature of the card, as banning mild-mannered citizens, which also have 5 copies, doesn't have quite the same sting. The Cowboys will leave deputies in their hand for large power swings on their turn or in duels, and Banlist neutralizes them. Banlist also makes for a great dueling action, since the deputies cannot preempt the resolution and be discarded for power once you resolve your card. For some factions where the more frequently occurring minions are actually better, Banlist shines as well. Banishing the first mates to the bottom of the deck targets the most powerful and reoccurring pirate card. There is also power in placing the card on the bottom of the deck, as opposed to discarding it. The Geeks, to me, have always subtly been designed to combat zombies with cards like Griefer. Why choose to shuffle the discard pile into the deck unless the discard pile could be advantageous? There are other cards that benefit from discard pile presence, but none are quite the same as burying the Tenacious Z on the bottom. For most factions who cannot shuffle their deck or have extensive card draw, burying on the bottom is effectively removing that card from the game. If you are playing against Geeks, choosing a faction that can shuffle the deck to undo Banlist is actually a viable strategy. I did this in a tournament with the Rockstars, whose Monarch could undo any groupie bans, and it was quite useful. True to form, the game has evolved in recent years where a lot of interesting deterrents to Banlist have arisen. If you place a minion on the bottom of the Granny deck, the Matriarch can draw it right back. With the superheroes, if I have 2 Power 5 minions in my hand and you ban one of them, I can now turn my mild-mannered citizen into the banned one and actually play both of them at the same turn, something I couldn't do previously. This actually happened to me, where the 2 precise minions I wanted were in my hand, and any other 5 from my deck would not have worked. It was the only way to play Captain Amazing and Mind Lady at the same turn. The player banned Mind Lady to not cancel Microbot Alpha, but I was able to get her and still overtook the base with Captain Amazing's help. For the last point I want to make, I want to try something new and challenge you to answer an interesting rules question. It's always great to see how players interpret the rules when things are particularly tricky. So the question is this: if I play Banlist and name Dynamite Surprise as the card to ban from a Cowboys player, what happens? I'm going to post the question in the Crank It Up Facebook page. After a few days, I'll reveal the official answer and we'll see who was correct. It isn't fun to be a Banlist victim, but the card has many uses in a variety of settings. I'm sure we all have our favorite Banlist stories. Mine is how the Smash Up app always bans my invaders the instant I draw them. What's your favorite target? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.